Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. I'm here with Michael Zervos. He is a guy who's currently in the middle of a journey that is going to take him faster than anyone else to every single country in the world. You can go to project-cosmos with a K, K-O-S-M-O-S, .com to hear more about his journey. So Michael, you're back again on the podcast, on the show. We met face-to-face in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. It was a great time. We went swimming together. Couldn't believe that you actually had time to do anything besides getting on one airplane to the next. And that's actually what surprises me about your journey is that like you shoot all these great videos on your Instagram, incredible videos, really good quality. And I'm like, where does he have the time to do this? I'm sure he got a producer or something like that. But the bottom line is just taking the time to go to the footage and actually seeing the sites. For those who are thinking you're taking a superficial tour, well, obviously, technically they're right, but still, you're not just jumping in the air from airport to airport and just stepping out of the airport. You're actually, diving in surprising amount of culture. So right now, you went from South Korea to Japan. You're in Japan right now, which is in Tokyo.
Tokyo right now, yes.
Okay, and then your next destination for the next 2-3 days?
I'm going to Nagoya and then Kyoto, and then I'm off to Vietnam.
See, this is my point, is that if you were really racing, you would not go to fucking Kyoto. You would just like say, fuck it, I hit Tokyo, goodbye. Anybody who wants to beat the records should be pretty easy because, you're kind of dilling and daddling around. You're not treating this as a true race. You're interviewing at least 2 people, asking them, remind people about your project, about how you're interviewing at least 2 people.
And by the way, you gave me one of the best compliments somebody has ever given me, maybe inadvertently. I don't have a producer. It's actually just me. I have an editor, and it's my brother, and that's about it. But I edit all the interviews, and he does. There's some other like people that kind of hand off some of the editing, but no producers. I kind of like plan as I go, and I shoot as I go, and I don't sleep that much. I'm an insomniac, so I find the time. There's maybe some stories here and there about like reaching some, I don't know. I didn't reach my breaking point, but I was kind of like somewhere in that ballpark in Africa at times. But my project is, it's twofold. I'm trying to break the world record to be the fastest person to travel to every country in the world. The record is currently 554 days. 553 is going to be breaking it. I'm shooting under that. And then also I personally, the most important, aside from my sponsors' desires for me to break the record, I desire to interview people all over the world about happiness, asking them, what is the happiest moment of your life?
Yeah, no, that's a great story, and it's an important one, and especially in a time that's so filled with negativity as we tend to be as Homo sapiens, focused on the negative. It's great to talk about happiness and to illustrate also that, of course, as human beings, we all have happy moments. And even if you're in Somalia or if you're in, well, the one country you haven't been to is Sudan, because I guess there's a lot of unhappy people in Sudan. Maybe you need to go interview and find the 2 happy people in Sudan. Tell us a little bit about why that is the only African country that you were not able to see so far.
I mean, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, some of your listeners may or may not know there's currently a civil war going on that has really high body count. It's been going on since roughly around like 4 or 5 months after I announced the project, but there's been violence there for a long time. So it just broke out into some really bad situations where you can't really even get into Khartoum, and Port Sudan is really the only place you can go safely. But it's hard to get a visa as you're traveling across the world, especially for some of these more difficult countries. And not a lot of countries are offering the Sudanese visa, and the Sudanese government is not really greenlighting a whole lot of tourist visas. There's a couple of exceptional countries where you can get them, and I know about them, and I know that it's possible that I can get it. But I just haven't kind of finagled my schedule in a way that I'm ready to dive into that yet, because I guess the circumstances are when you change the schedule, you have to kick one of the countries down further, and it changes everything else, cascading everything else downward. which ruins all of my scheduling, or you flip flop countries, basically pulling one from, ahead and then like bringing it forward and then kicking one down where that used to be. So that's
Right.
kind of the way that you can change the schedule without changing everything.
You said that you had to go to Palau on a certain date. If am I right about Palau being one of the critical dates?
Yeah, that's a good memory. It's my entryway to the islands, the Pacific Islands, I guess, would be like the Philippines, and then Palau, and then you've got like what is it, Micronesia, and then onward and onward, onward. It's kind of like the gateway through this stuff. But for anybody who's kind of gone to some of these places, you'll realize that there's not a lot of flights in and out. I'm trapped on the Marshall Islands. If I don't want to double back, very expensive flights, I'm trapped on there for 5 days. The previous record holder did the Pacific Islands in 2 months, and I'm scheduled for half that. So like she wasted a lot of time because I think she was doing it on the fly. But I mean, also there's delays that I can't predict, and Taylor wasn't able to predict too. So I'm just trying to get there on the day that I was planning. No sooner, no later, and then I can kind of go along as I was like, just basically like clockwork. And
What's
hopefully there's no
that
delays.
date?
It's around August.
Okay, so it's coming up.
Yes, it is. I mean, yeah, there's not a crazy ton of countries here in Southeast Asia, and like you've got, once you do the peninsula, you're Indonesia, you're Brunei, you're I think I'm going through Timor on the way back, so it's not this time around. It's through after I'm done with all the Pacific Islands. Yeah, and Singapore's after that too. So I'm kind of going to the Philippines pretty quickly, starting the island hop.
Yeah, so you haven't been to the Singapore yet?
No, I haven't. No, that's kind of I think Singapore will launch me over to the Maldives because they've got a direct flight there.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's a very fascinating country, Singapore, in the sense that it was like many African countries back in 1960. It was poor, underdeveloped, and things like that. And somehow, thanks to Lee Kuan Yew, it would be interesting to see the transformation that has gone over there. You can look at pictures of Singapore in 1960, and it will look kind of like Africa did in 1960, in a lot of parts of Africa, should I say. What were your takeaways from the African continent? Was it a continent that gave you a lot of hope, a lot of despair, or mixed emotions?
My feelings are still, I mean, admittedly, still convoluted, complicated, and I'm still working through a lot of them. And I think as I've been traveling through Asia and the Middle East, it's given me a lot of ability to juxtapose elements of development and history and culture in a way that maybe I wouldn't have if I had taken a full break. I did part of Africa and I went back home and I came back and I did some more. Like I think one of the benefits and of the way I'm traveling, and there's not many because it's not, I'm not getting deep, but one of the benefits, though, is that I'm able to look at things from a bird's eye perspective. And that's really important in Africa because, as you know, tribes are so important, and tribal relations and the way that tribes they transcend colonial borders, colonial gerrymandering. And if you're able to go from country to country to country, you can see where certain people, the Hausa, for instance, in Nigeria, where all they are. They're not just in Nigeria, they're in Niger as well, and they're elsewhere. And like you can see where some of these people are that you maybe if you just visit Nigeria, you may not have realized the political, the socioeconomics, the cultural implications of tribes existing across many, many different borders, they're not like housed in one perfect country. And you're kind of able to see from a bird's eye perspective, going from country to country to country, this is the region where these people exist, and culture, it's porous. It bleeds over into different countries. And I understand maybe you know a little bit more about it, but some of the gerrymandering, some of the border cutting was to weaken some of the tribal power from, for instance, in Senegal and the Gambia and all this sort of stuff, um, to weaken tribal power. So you may not be able to see some of these observations if you're just traveling one and then you're leaving and then one and the other. But okay, taking a step back to answer your question, I feel um, I feel a lot of hope in the power of the individual to show compassion towards strangers. Um, a perfect stranger walks into a country looking different than you, acting different than you, speaking a different language than you, and somehow, some way, they are willing to show hospitality and to welcome you into a place where you may not feel all that comfortable in, because you're the only one that looks like that or speaks like that, or I mean, many of the countries, most of the countries, you're not black, you're going to stand out. So from an individual perspective, there were so many people that I got to meet face to face and talk to, and they showed me true compassion and grace when I had cultural faux pas, when I didn't understand things, and they defended me in certain scenarios, and were willing to take into consideration my perspective. I met some remarkable people on an individual level. Also, there are people really doing their very best under the worst circumstances. And I met a lot of wonderful people just staying afloat, and the sacrifices that they have to make, and being able to see this firsthand, the sacrifices that they need to make in order to live, to help their children survive. It's awe striking. I mean, you see some of it in America, but poverty isn't the same in America as it is in Africa. Our poor people have cell phones and internet at every Starbucks, and most people in many countries outside, many cities outside of the largest cities, they may not have this infrastructure. On the flip side, I had a lot of run-ins with government policy, with corruption, with well, I guess with systems, people being trapped in systems, and you could see them being pushed, being kind of dragged along with the system, sometimes unwillingly, and the foreigners kind of get caught up in this, even if they're trying to do something good for people, even if they're trying to kind of show some empathy. The systems there really are fucked up, and it's something that you take for granted until you go into countries where they don't have things that work, currency that works, a system of law and order that works, and I don't know how to fix this stuff, and it's probably different from case to case, but it was really discouraging to see people trying to do good and running into walls over and over and over again, and shrugging their shoulders and say, this is just how it is. I mean, like, really, this, like, an African sense of humor, I see it very frequently. It's just smiling and like jovially saying, like, that's how it goes. Like, almost like sort of like a dark humor, like acceptance and laughing in spite of the brutality of the situation. So I was speaking a long time, trying to answer your question in a bit more holistic way. There's more there, I think, but those are some of my initial thoughts.
I appreciate that. So let's just wrap up with talking about your next steps and how you're doing on your Palau crucial date. Are you on track or not?
I am on track so far, on the day. So I'm really really happy about that. I've had to kick a couple countries down a little bit, which means less time in certain places, but I'll deal with that once I get to Europe, which is that's not going to be that difficult.
Okay, good. Because you have got a little buffer built in.
Right. I think that the big obstacles that remain will be Sudan, will be Israel and Palestine, and will be North Korea. I think the rest are going to be they're going to be.
Oh, Palestine is considered a country in your. I thought it was not UN.
It is an observer state. That's what they consider it, an observer state. And given the rules, you have to go to Palestine and Vatican as observer states.
Vatican will be easy, but and Palestine. I mean, imagine the West Bank can't be that hard to get into.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I know people who are there, who I know journalists that have gone there. It's not difficult. It's just, you don't know exactly where things are going to go in 3 or 4 months. It's a tumultuous area.
I'm sure you'll be able to do it. I mean, I think with the Red Sea and maybe getting into the port of Sudan via the Red Sea, I think that will be your best option there, don't you think? You may not be able to get off the boat.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of countries that fly there. I know, guaranteed, like Eritrea, you can actually get a visa within a week. It's just then you have to get a visa in Eritrea, and then you have to go to Eritrea, and that's a rather expensive endeavor. And I'm still on a budget. I'm not independently wealthy here, so there are ways in, and even Greece gives visas out, and there's just a couple of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, well, you'll figure that one out. At least I think it's doable so far, Sudan. I'm just impressed by your voyage. So I'll let you go to sleep. I want to catch up with you again, maybe in a month or two, and maybe from Palau. How about that? Whenever you're stuck for 5 days in what island are you going to be stuck for 5 days?
Yeah, the Marshall Islands.
There you go. So you and I will talk in the Marshall Islands because you have nothing better to do than to talk to me.
That'll be good. That'll be good. Hopefully the internet's okay.
Yeah. For sure. All right, Michael. Well, best of luck. Remind people where to find you on Instagram and beyond.
Yeah, so it's the Project Cosmos on Instagram and TikTok. And then you've got project-cosmos.com. And it kind of links to all these other things that you may or may not want to see.
We want to see it. All right, great. Well, I hope you have even longer hair when I see you next time.
Yep, I can guarantee that.
Okay.